So this is class 18 with respect to bevel gears, and previous class we had just taken a problem, we had just introduced the problem. Now we'll continue solving it. So yeah, so it was a right angle bevel gear. It is used to transmit 10 kilowatts at 1600 rpm of pinion. We had written the details. Pinion is of 100 mm diameter, speed ratio is 4, and the material was already given. Material for pinion, untreated forged steel, and gear is untreated C40 steel. Gears have 20-degree full depth involute profile, service factor 1.5, and the gears are based on, you should design the gears based on strength. That is, you need not take care of the calculations of dynamic load and wear load. Now, what did we find out so far in these calculations? See, with given the ratio as 4 and the right angle between the shafts, okay, what should be the individual pitch angle of the bevel gear? So that brought us to this relation in 12.32, page 217. Now, one of the things I would like to mention here is regarding this right angle bevel gear. You can make them somewhat special. That is, what do you mean by right angle bevel gear? We have understood that if one shaft is horizontal, other should be vertical. Okay, the included angle between them is totally 90 degrees. Okay, my tab. Yeah. So whatever the combination is, the associated gearing will happen in such a way that the total transmission from driver to driven will have an angle of 90 degrees. Okay, so that 90 degrees of pitch angle between the driver and the driven can be attained in various ways. For example, in this particular problem, I is equal to 4. Okay, I is equal to 4. So there is a transmission at 90 degrees with a speed ratio of 1:4. So obviously one gear will be larger and one will be quite smaller compared to each other. Okay, and for calculation purpose we have assumed that Z1 is equal to 20 and Z2 is equal to 80, which will be changing later. So this is just to find the weaker member. Now what if from start to the end, that is, if from driver to driven, if it was 1:1 ratio, if it was 1:1 ratio, that means that there is no change in the speeds, no change in torque. It is only the change in direction that we are looking for. If it is 1:1 ratio, then such type of gears are called as miter gears. Okay, such type of gears are called miter gears, specifically named because they are all identical in size, equal in teeth, and in order to have 1:1 ratio, you need to have same number of teeth, same amount of diameter, same size, etc. So for such a right angle combination, we call it them as miter gears. This is not a miter gear because the ratio is 4:1. Okay, 4:1 ratio is going on. So driver is rotating 4 times and driven is rotating only once. Okay, so since it is right angle, the formulas also get simplified. You have delta 1, the first pitch angle is around 14 degrees and the next pitch angle is around 75 degrees. Now in this problem we have thoroughly mentioned that diameter is given 100 mm diameter, but we don't have the number of teeth. So taking diameter as reference, what we can say is that for temporarily we will assume, so this is temporarily, Yeah, I think I should have mentioned this word. Temporarily, assume that z1 is 20 and z2 is 80, 4 times z1. Then the virtual number of teeth will get adjusted by z1 by cos delta 1 and z2 by cos delta 2. And since the difference in angle is large, owing to this speed ratio, I is equal to 4, that is why you got delta 1 as only 14 and delta 2 as 75, which is almost 5 times of delta 1. And that difference brought us to ZE1 and ZE2 being quite larger apart. Okay, so ZE1 was around 20.6 and ZE2 was around 329, so very large amount. Okay, so we'll continue now from here. Once we do that, what are the things that are pending? We need to find out the weaker member. Okay, so before that I just want to find out what is sigma d1 and sigma d2. According to the material that is given, it is untreated forged steel. Okay, okay, untreated forged steel for pinion. Sigma d1 comes out to be 172.6. Let's check the values under these are the values under table 12.7 again. Okay, and what about uh, untreated C40 steel? So sigma d2 will be equal to 207 megapascals. Okay, yes. Now for the value of y1, since it is 20-degree full depth, we can write 0.154 minus 0.912 by ZE1. So 20.615, find that value, and y2 similarly is 0.154 minus 0.912 by ZE2, which is 329.762. So y1 value will be
0.1097.
yes, good, 0.1097, and this will be
0.15123.
yes, good. So y1 and y2 is this. So let us find out sigma d1 y1, 172.6 into 0.1097.
The first one is 18.93.
Yes, 18.93. The second one,
31.29.
yes. So now you can understand which is weaker. Okay, this is smaller. Sigma d1 y1 is smaller. So 18.93 being lesser, you can say that the pinion is weaker. So design for strength based on pinion. Okay, we'll use the usual formula. We'll try to adjust there. Ft is equal to sigma d Cv b. I'll write the extended form pi into y m L minus b by L. What are the some things we know already? See, this formula we have used for the previously also. So the first problem, let me go back and just recap. This is the formula that you chose 12.37 in page 218. 12.37 in page 218. So with respect to what we are doing now, with respect to pinion, so you can say it is all with respect to the suffix 1. So this is sigma d1, okay, this is y1, okay, other things will remain. You can immediately find out, that is if velocity is there which helps us to understand what is CV, we can immediately do that. Velocity is equal to pi d1 n1 by 60,000. So pi into diameter is directly given, n1 is 1600 by 60,000. So this should give us 8.377 meters per second. So this is the velocity. Based on velocity, you can find CV. Since nothing is mentioned in the problem, if you go back to the statement, there is nothing mentioned about the type of the gear or the manufacturing process that is used to make the gear. So we will assume form cutters if nothing is mentioned. So CV will be 3.05 by 3.05 plus V. So with 8.3,
0.266.
yes, good. 0.267, if I take the recurring decimal and round it off, 0.267 I'm getting around. Now you know what is sigma d1, you know what is CV. Now let us find some value in terms of m for b, and what about this value? Interestingly, L minus b by L. We will take the same value as what we have taken. So assuming b is equal to L by 3 as the value, L minus b by L will be simply be equal to 2 by 3. Okay, if you put b is equal to L by 3, then L minus b by L will come to be 2 by 3. Okay, what about the value of b itself? B should be written in terms of other quantities, right? Yeah. Now of course that is there, but there is one catch here. If it was some other gear, we would have written like that. Now since diameter is given, okay, so let us go to that cone distance formula. In the previous problem I had mentioned one note, so let me go back to that. See here in this note, for right angled bevel gears, that is theta equal to 90 degrees, we had let me highlight that. Yeah, so we had L is equal to half root of d1 square plus d2 square. This is for right angled bevel gears only. So let us use this formula in order to find out L and then subsequently B, B being L by 3. So here L is equal to half root of d1 square plus d2 square. We know that d2 is equal to 4 times d1, which is 400 mm. So taking that into consideration, root of 100 square plus 400 square comes to around 206.15 mm. If L is this much, then B is equal to L by 3. Okay, you check the values. should come around 68.7 mm. Okay, p value is 68.7, L value is 26.15. Okay, we can immediately find out. What about Ft, the left hand side value? Ft is 1000 PCS by V. So it is 1000 into 10 kilowatts. CS value is directly given as 1.5 and V is 8.377. So this comes out to be
1790.49.
yes, 1790.49. This is the tangential tooth load. Now substitute this value back. I'll write the equation. 1790.49 must be equal to sigma d1, which is 172.6. CV value came out to be 0.267, and the next value is B, which is 68.7 into pi into y. Pi is known but y is not known, into m, okay, into 2 by 3. So what is the equation that you are getting? The equation that you are getting is for m into y, which is required. So what is the difference now that you can find? When you did the equation with respect to spur gear and helical gear with number of teeth not known, you would have gone for m square y. Now this is m into y, which is required. Okay, so can you calculate that, how much it comes? Yeah. Let me check the value here. Yes, correct. 0.27. 0.27. Okay. Now we have to go for iteration of those values. So just m into y, you are going to get around 0.27. Let us go to the table again where standard values are discussed and choose an appropriate value. Okay. So what are the things that we need to iterate? So of course you choose the module in M, then that will correspond to Z1, which is nothing but D1 by M, which is the number of teeth. That will give rise to ZD1, which is what? Z1 by cos delta 1, right? Yeah, Z1 by cos delta 1. Okay, once ZD1 comes, then you have to recalculate what is Y1, which is 0.154 minus 0.912 by ZD1, then M into Y1. So actually what they require is M into Y1, okay, to be very specific, Y into M into Y1. Okay, now if I just look at the value M into Y, we know that Y1 comes around 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 and all that. So how much can be M? Of course it can take some values, but where can we start with? We can start with 1.5, we can start with 2, we can start with 3 and so on. So 1.25 comes a little bit lesser. So what we'll do is we'll go with 1.5. We'll just check whether 1.5 will satisfy. If it is 1.5, then what about Z1?
66.67.
Okay, 66.67. So you have to say approximate it to 67 here. Okay, because this is number of teeth. Okay, with 67 as value, then what will be this one? ZE1. ZE1 can be a decimal value.
69.06.
69.06 ZE1. Okay. Y1 is
0.14.
okay. 0.14 some value. Ultimately
0.1408.
08. Okay. So obviously it will come less now.
0.2112.
Yeah. So it is not yet reaching this, but very close to 7 and to 1, 1, 2. Then you go for 2. You go for 2 being a whole number. This is 100 by 2. So you are getting the whole number 50.
51.53.
Yes. And
Upon 136.
yes.
And sir, it is 0.272.
Yes. Correct. Just what we require, 0.27. Yeah. So this is what we got, just above, slightly above what is required. So m into y adopted greater than m into y required. So the final thing is module m is 2 mm. Okay, then z1 is now 50. Remember that temporarily we had assumed z1 to be 20 over here. We had temporarily assumed that z1 is 20 only for the sake of finding the weaker member. Now z1 is actually 50 that is required. Then what about z2? 4 times z1, 200 teeth. Yes, 200 teeth. Okay, so what is the idea of this problem? You have module 2 mm, diameter is, if you want to say diameter is 100 here, okay, already given this is d2 is 400. Okay, this is the combination that you need to use for a right angled bevel gear with a speed reduction of 4. Okay, yes, 50 to 50 and 200 amount of teeth. How did we come to this number? That is, of course, we know the procedure, but my idea of asking is why we chose this number is because of this speed ratio having a bearing or an effect on this pitch angle. Okay, 14.036 and 75.964. This makes all the difference. Okay, if it was 1:1, then you would get, if it is 1:1, then what would happen? Delta 1 and delta 2 being identical, both would be 45 degrees. Okay, the same number of teeth for Z1 and Z2. So that I think it is good if you go for the next problem where similar gears are discussed. Okay, so you can please take down this third question. Okay, so what is the highlight of this problem? As a statement itself starts, you have a pair of miter gears. Okay, so what are miter gears? You see, when this is mentioned, miter gears is mentioned, we need not think about, like, we need not go for searching for any other value. When the word itself says miter gears, we have seen by definition, whatever you put for one gear, the same values will be the values will be the same for the given for the next gear. They are identical in teeth, they are identical in diameter. So when you say miter gears, Z1 will be equal to Z2, D1 will be equal to D2, N1 will also be equal to N2. All those things should come in your mind. Okay, speed ratio is 1 is to 1. They are both all identical in all respects, even material wise. Sigma D1 is equal to sigma D2. Only when all things are equal, we call them as miter gears. Okay, so it does not matter here, it does not bother here which one you are designing for, correct? Because of this property, you cannot say this is weaker and that is stronger. Both are of equal strength. Okay, so you can say any one of them can be taken for design, since both gears are identical. So this is one property that you can use. Okay, what about transmission? 6 kilowatts. So let us write down those values. 6 kilowatts, 1200 rpm. As mentioned, N1 and N2, whichever one you take, it is 1200. Pitch line velocity is not to exceed 11 meters per second. So what they are saying is V should be lesser than or equal to 11 meters per second. The teeth are having 20-degree full depth involute. So alpha is 20-degree full depth involute. Gears are made of C40 untreated steel. So here do we require that property? Okay, only if required then we will use it. Assuming medium shocks and 8 to 10 hours per day of service, design the gears from the standpoint of strength. Assuming medium shocks and 8 to 10 hours per service. Okay, so series factor will come into picture here. Medium shocks, 8 to 10 hours per day of service. So that service factor, if you check out, that service factor comes out to be 1.5. Okay, you can check it. You know how to check this value in the table. We have done for all the problems. Similar way, We can check this out. You have to design the gears from the standpoint of strength. Okay. Now, with this, here we know that pitch line velocity not to exceed 11 meters per second. What is the actual formula of V? You know that V is equal to pi d1 n1 by 60,000 should be lesser than or equal to 11 meters per second. Okay, what is the one unknown here? Of course, both are unknown. We don't know what is Z, we don't know what is D. That is, both number of teeth and diameters are unknown. But one idea is that whatever you assign for first thing, it will also be valid for the second. That is, pinion and gear are identical. Anyway, pi into d1 is unknown, n1 is 1200 by 60,000, less than or equal to 11. Now when you solve this for the remaining of the factors, that is pi 1200 and 60,000, when you take it to the other side, d1 should be lesser than or equal to what value?
175.07.
Yes, 175.07. Okay, yeah. So it should be lesser than or equal to that value. So what you do is you use this value as reference and find out what should be the actual value of V. Now let us round figure this. That is, we'll take d1 as equal to 175 mm. Then what will be the actual value of velocity? Pi into 175 into 1200 by 60,000. You get a value very close to 11. If you do this value, you should get around 10.99 meters per second. This is the new value of velocity. Why we took 175? Because it was very close to, see, 175.07 is a decimal value. So we don't want decimal values, and it is not possible also to manufacture such things. So they always come in standard forms. So we'll go for 175 as the nearest value. We take 175 mm and resubstitute it. You should get around 11 itself, which is around 10.99. Okay, actual value. So we are settling with this particular value. We are which is less than 11. Okay, so this condition is already satisfied. Fine. Yeah. Next, what about the CV factor? Which factor should we take? Now CV factor is dependent on, as we told, it is dependent on how it is manufactured, whether it is form cutters or generated teeth. Now, of course, if the problem is not mentioned, we can assume it as form cutters usually. But do we have that same liberty here? If you read the question carefully again, we have a pair of miter gears which tells you all those things, that everything is equal and identical. Along with that, it says with generated teeth. Look at this, with generated teeth. So that means your CV value is already established. Your CV value should be taken for generated teeth factor, not form cutter factor. So since generated teeth are mentioned, 6.1 by 6.1 plus V will come. Okay, we cannot assume form cutters here because it's already mentioned it is generated teeth. So use this 6.1 by 6.1 plus V with a new value of 10.99. So how much you're going to get?
0.356.
0.356.
Yes, getting around 0.3569. Yeah, 0.3569 as a CV value. Okay. Sigma D value for I think that we have to find out. C40 untreated steel. Let me write down here. C40 untreated steel, sigma D value, that is D1 and D2, whatever you take, is around 207 megapascal from table 12.7. Okay. What about FT value? FT again is 1000 PCS by V. So how much it was? 6 kilowatts, and CS value was 1.5 and V value was 10.99.
818.92.
Yeah, 0.9 is it? Okay.
Yes.
I'm getting around 5. Okay, well, we'll go with whatever your value is, 818.9. Next, since the gears are identical, and look at this again. Yeah, the gears are totally identical here, and since it is already mentioned, it is mitre gears. It is mitre gears. They are only used for change in direction. Okay, you can also say that theta here is 90 degrees. We can also say that theta here is 90 degrees. Why we say that theta is 90 degrees? See, the mitre gate definition itself is that it is both are identical and it is for a value of right angle. So that means that delta 1 and delta 2 are also identical.
45 will be each other.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So delta 1 equal to delta 2 equal to 45 degrees. Okay, theta is 90. Both are identical and 1:1 ratio. So you can say that the length, that is L1 and L2, are also identical. So that is half root of d1 square plus d2 square. Okay, you can write half into, since both are equal, 2 into d square.
D by root 2.
Yeah. So this is 175 we have taken by root 2. Around 123.74. Let's check the value. B is equal to L by 3, which is 1/3 of that value, 41.24 mm. Okay, let me put the formula. Sigma D CV B capital Y M L minus B by L. So this is 818.9 as you mentioned. Sigma D is 207. CV is 0.3569. It's 41.24. It's pi into Y. That is for capital Y we are taking. Module is M. So still we don't know the number of teeth. That is what we need to find out. And okay, what to do with L minus B by L? L minus B by L will be 2 by 3. Since B is equal to L by 3. Same type of calculation, M into Y, which is required, will be
Point 403.
0.403 is quite high value.
0.128.
I got 1283.
0.128.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, please check the value if you have got some other things. Yes, all of us are getting 0.1283. Okay, so once we got that value, we'll go for iterations as in the previous problem. So module is in mm, z1 is equal to d1 by m, or z2, whatever you can, need not be 1 and 2, it's all identical here. Ze is equal to z by cos delta, where delta is equal to 45 degrees and y1 is 0.154 minus 0.192 by z, 20-degree full depth, right? Yeah. This is ze, not z. Then m into y. Yeah. If you look at the value 0.1283, so it's anyway, it is lesser than, it's much less value. You see, last time by taking 2 itself we came to around 0.2. So let us start with still lesser value. Let us say I give a value of 1.25. Let us say we give a value of 1.25. Then your z will be
That is 140.
yeah, you'll get a whole number here. It is 140. So d is 175 and 175 by 1.25 is 140. If you get 140 here, then this will be 197.98. Here delta is, okay, delta is 45 degrees. Let's confirm the value. Then y value will be around 0.1494. Yeah, can anybody solve for
0.1867.
Yes, 0.1867, correct. Obviously this will satisfy 1867 because the required is 0.128, but
So for one is also, it is also satisfying.
yes, correct. So we'll go for still optimize the value. Why to go for 1.25 when 1 you can satisfy? So if you take 1, it is just 175 here. This will be, this value will change to 47.48.
So design will be safe for 1.25 also, right?
Yeah, correct. But we are going for optimized value.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Sir, but if we go for higher value, won't it be over designing it?
Yeah, something that is not required. That much value is not required. So we'll try to fit the least possible. And anyway, 1 is the last one. Even if 1 comes higher, okay, it will come a little bit higher than what is required. It is in the safe region itself, but below 1 we don't go. We don't have any choice of modules. So we'll stop at 1 itself. So 0.1503 you will get, and finally this is 0.1503. You see this 0.1503.
0.153.
Okay, 3 is it?
No, sir, 0.1503.
Okay. Okay, anyway, 0.153 or 1503, we are not going to use this value. We are just mentioning that my required, okay, lesser, or I should say adopted. Yeah, adopted greater than m into y required. See, this is quite high when compared to the required value of 0.1283. But still, this is the last of the modules that we can use, that is module 1. Okay, so module is 1 mm to be set. and Z1 equal to Z2, both same, equal to 175. Yeah, 175 teeth. So just a recap, what is the highlight of this problem? The highlight of this problem was it was a miter gear. Miter gear means 90-degree shaft angle. When once 90 degree is mentioned, then delta 1 and delta 2 both will be 45 degrees, correct? And it is same in all respects, including material. Material is same, the gear ratio is 1, the number of teeth, the amount of diameter, and the speed, everything will remain the same. The second point of this problem was to mention which type of teeth it is carrying. It is a generated teeth it is carrying. So with respect to which form it is using to in order to get manufactured, your CV value, the velocity factor will change. And since in the problems like this where pitch line velocity has a limit, you have to fit a particular diameter of gear. Okay. Suppose say we could not get, with all these conditions, we could not get a proper matching value. Okay, we could not get something close enough, then we would go and slightly change the diameter, say 175 to say 170 or 160 or 150, and try to fit in a gear with that particular profile. That also can be done. But of course, this problem is straightforward, pretty straightforward and quite easy with respect to that. Okay, so I think we can wind up with the bevel gears over here. So the last of the gears that we have to discuss here is a worm gear drive. Okay, so let us go with a little bit of discussion today, and if time permits, then we'll start off with the problem. So what is a worm gear drive? What is the idea behind the worm gear drive? I'll just go back and show you the slide which I discussed for bevel gears. So there was one mention about, depending on where the gear is used, your profile of your pinion will change. So for example, here in this particular slide, you have a spiral bevel gear or even straight bevel gear can be put up here. Then once you change the position, you cannot go for a straight teeth. You can go for a hypoid, you can go for a spiroid teeth, okay, depending on where the pinion is based on. And we know that hypoid gears are used for differential, okay, not exactly the differential I would say, but from the propeller shaft to the crown gear of the differential, hypoid gears are used in automobiles. And then you slightly change the position, you will go for a more spiral fashion, and that is called as a spiroid gear. But as you go to the periphery, that is outside, as you go to the outer periphery, you come across a combination where the circumference, hello, please ensure that if you are asking a question, I'm not able to hear you. If you are not asking a question, please mute your mic. Okay. Here we have teeth on the outer periphery, and this worm gear tries to engage. Okay. So this is the arrangement. It's actually an extension of a bevel gear that we can see. So the worm gear comes on the outer periphery. You cannot give any gear which is on the crown fashion. Okay. Once it comes to the crown or over the gear, then you can either take a spiral form or a hypoid form or a spiroid form. But when you go to the outer periphery, you can have an arrangement of a worm and a gear. So with that as the introduction, let us go and see the features of this worm gear drive. When we say worm, now why does the how does the nomenclature occur? Okay, why we say worm? Of course, it looks like a worm in the natural sense, in the natural world. So that is why it's a worm, and it resembles a screw. Okay, a very large screw where you have helical grooves cut over a shaft. Okay, so that is the concept of worm, and the shaft connecting the worm is called as a worm shaft, which is uh, welded to it, or it's an integral part of it as a single crystal. Okay, what about this gear? So we call it as a worm wheel in general, or also called as a gear. Okay, many different people use different nomenclature, so we'll come across this gear concept also. Strictly speaking, it is a worm wheel, but generally called as a gear. So in a worm gear drive, one is a worm, one is a gear. Okay, where there is no confusion. There is, and absolutely, you don't have any confusion whether which is the pinion or driver, or which is the gear or driven. So that concept was more prominent when it came to spur gear and helical gears. But whereas in this, you absolutely know that worm is the one which is going to drive the gear. Why we can say that? You see the operation of it. There's a small animation here. If you see the operation, you see the worm is rotating on its own axis. Okay, so this is the axis of rotation, and you see the axis of rotation of the gear. It is like this. Okay, so when this red colored worm wheel rotates, it gradually passes over each set of teeth, making it to push linearly. So it is giving a rotational motion and it is getting pushed linearly. So the total action is having a screw action itself. Okay, one individual set of teeth, it is going to push, sliding and sliding, and the rotations that you see, the difference in rotations, this can rotate at a high speed, worm, but whereas the output is quite slow. But at the same time, the torque input for the worm is going to be very small, and the torque output that we get for the worm wheel, from the worm wheel or gear, is going to be very high. So application wise, this is a very beautiful case where you want very high torque from a very low torque application. Okay, something like you want to do or fetch or pull or elevate an object from the ground of a very high capacity using just hand power. So this is one of the very beautiful examples. One of the very prominent things where it is used is at the manned junctions at railways. When that fellow rotates a wheel, it's quite open for all the public to see. So that is why I mentioned that. So that when you rotate a worm, he rotates an arm, the entire, both the sides, there is a manned crossing for the railways. So when the train passes, there is a barricade that comes down, and then when he rotates the wheel again, the barricade just comes up. Okay, rotates back to its initial position. So this is just a concept where it is used in general that we can see. Okay, but having said that, worm and worm wheel combinations are used very widely in most of our applications, everyday applications. Your speedometer, odometer, everything will carry this worm and worm wheel combinations, but they are quite small, and since they are compact and packed inside the console itself, it is most of them fail to notice this. Why would you say that worm and worm wheel combinations are there? The advantage is the speed reduction. We'll come to the advantages now. Speed reduction as high as 100:1. So just imagine that you have a vehicle. The speedometer or odometer, that is for the vehicle. That is the tire. And if I say the speedometer or odometer, let me say the odometer. Odometer measures how many kilometers a vehicle has traveled from the time it has come out of the manufacturing facility. So you have when the tire rotates, the distance traveled by the vehicle is a function of the circumference of the tire, right? Tire rotate once, it means that the vehicle has traveled the distance equal to its circumference. So that circumference has to be translated onto the meter here, okay, or the counter that is kept, okay, how many counters, how many thousands of kilometers, we see 5,000, 10,000, etc. Now how it is converted, because you are dealing with a system which is very high, very large here, and this is a very small handheld device here, okay, very small one. So how do you reduce that speed? You will at least have 2 to 3 sets of worm and worm wheel devices in between. So there is one wheel which is directly connected. So one is going to reduce it here, okay, first set, then it's going to second set, then third set probably, and then finally to the metering device. So there is 1:100 reduction here, then 1:100 reduction here, 1:100 reduction here. By the time it has traveled so many, that is rotated by so many times, rotated and traversed by 1 kilometer, then there is just one change in the dial, 1 kilometer, okay. So to do this, you require a speed reduction as high as 100:1, okay. Very small compact arrangement you can use for this, and they usually of course near the tire they may use metallic, but you can also do this using plastic gears, okay, but same worm and worm wheel combinations. Second, due to its operation, you have seen that it is very compact with small overall dimensions. Just imagine if you want high gear reduction as high as 100:1, what will be the size of a spur gear and a helical gear? 100:1 means it's a very huge difference. But with worm and worm wheel combination, you can make it very compact, and compactness also means a large savings in material, a very large savings in material. Okay. Next, operation is smooth and silent. Why is that? The action itself shows you what happens. That each set of that helical groove is kind of sliding or pushing in a successive manner with the each of those teeth. So it is not just line contact, it is a kind of helical groove contact. So it is, the groove is sliding or engaging continuously with the teeth. So that is why the operation is smooth and silent. But of course there is a disadvantage, we'll look into that later. Next, provision for self-locking operation. Self-locking. You might have come across this term when you had studied power screws in your MD1. So what happens in self-locking? Yes, can anyone recollect? What do you mean by self-locking?
Sir, it can rotate in only one direction.
Yes, good. So it can rotate in only one direction. So we know that if there is a pinion and if there is a gear very large, we know that pinion will rotate the gear. So this is the pinion and this is the gear. But it can also happen that a gear can rotate a pinion. Of course, we don't use for such applications, but it is possible. It is possible to rotate the gear, rotate the pinion using the gear with a high, lesser torque and high speed ratio. But in the case of worm gear, we know that the axes are different, the entire mechanism comes to be different. So this is the arrangement, and the worm will rotate, and only then the worm wheel will rotate. Only then this will start rotating. The axis of transmission is totally different. There are some cases where a worm wheel can rotate the worm back, okay, but not all the cases. You can arrange the angle in such a way that self-locking is possible. That is, only when the worm rotates, the worm wheel can rotate. The reverse is not possible. So self-locking operation provision can be made. When you say provision, it is actually with respect to the angle. One angle is mentioned. Okay, one angle is mentioned. We'll come to that later in the future slide. What is that angle and what is its importance? very similar to what you studied for power screws. Okay, the same thing. Okay, disadvantages. As already mentioned, the operation is such that it slides over teeth by teeth, giving rise to very high speed reduction, and the speed reduction also can mean it is very high torque. Okay, the very high torque, very high speed reduction gives low efficiency. Why low efficiency? Because it slides one or the other, continuous engaging. It is not just touching and pushing and engaging and leaving it. It is continuously engaging with it, and that is why there is very high friction. That is why you have low efficiency. You have also very high heat generation. Okay, low efficiency and heat generation. That is why, because of these aspects, you have low power transmitting capacity. Okay, low power transmitting capacity. See, we are not saying here that it is low torque. It would be very highly incorrect to say it is low torque. It is actually a very high torque. Why? Because you are putting a very minimum effort here and getting maximum output here. So torque wise it is still very high. There is no question, no doubt about it, and there is no match for this worm and worm wheel drive when it comes to torque. When we say low power transmitting capacity, that means the power that is been given in order to drive the mechanism, okay, when it comes out as driven from the worm wheel, it comes to be a very lesser value when compared to a similar combination of spur gear, helical gear, and even bevel gear. Okay, why? Because most of the power is getting lost due to heat generation, because it is continuously sliding one over the other. Okay, due to heat generation, most of the power is getting wasted. That is why we say, when you compare the input and output, the power generation or the power transmitting capacity is lesser. This is not to get confused with low torque. Okay, torque, it is still high. Okay, it can lock itself. You can do a lot of work with just a compact operation such as this. But at the same time, when you really understand the power, you say you have a motor here. Say you attach a motor here. You have a motor which drives it. Say 1 kilowatt of motor, you have used it, but the output may be around say 0.75 kilowatts. Why? Where has that 0.25 kilowatts gone? That has gone in generation of pushing the gear and generation of heat itself. Okay, so that is why it says low power transmitting capacity. What about efficiency? Yes, efficiency is a consequence of heat generation, so that is why the power transmission is lost. Okay, a large amount of power can be lost in this process. One final point that we need to understand is worm wheel is made of phosphor bronze, increase in cost. So this is something special which we have not seen in any of those gear combinations. It says particularly worm wheel. So worm wheel means the gear which we are talking about. Okay, so this is the worm wheel. This worm wheel should be made of phosphor bronze. For most of the applications, it is made of phosphor bronze. Okay, what is the importance of that? See, the worm should be is a high strength machine component, so it can be made of any high grade steel. But when it comes to the worm wheel, it should be made of a softer material when compared to the worm itself. Okay, looking from the material point of view, phosphor bronze is a costlier material. Phosphor bronze is a costlier material than the worm material itself. Phosphor bronze is a special alloy, so that is why there is an increase in cost. Now, rather than the cost, the question comes, why we require a phosphor bronze? Why can't we use a metal to metal combination itself? One is made of high speed steel, and why not the other one is also made of high speed steel? Okay, the answer for that, see, let us first discuss this. Okay. Now there are two things here. Worm is there is worm wheel. Worm is a hardened steel. Okay. The reason is threads of the worm are subjected to fluctuating stresses and the number of stress cycles are fairly large. Therefore, surface endurance strength is important. Okay, fluctuating stresses. High fluctuating stresses are there in worm. Why we can say that? See, you look at a worm. If I just try to draw in 3 dimensions, so there's a cylinder on which there are grooves. Okay, if you take one section of a groove, there is a very high like load at one particular moment over here, and the rest of the grooves are all free, and suddenly the next section of the groove will come into high fluctuating stress area, high stress area. So because of this fluctuation, when once it is highly loaded, once it is not loaded at all, once it is highly loaded, once it is not loaded at all. So due to this, the thread forms are subjected to high fluctuating stresses. Okay. Therefore, the surface endurance strength becomes highly important, and that is why we go for a hardened steel. And there are two parts actually, if you look at it from that perspective, that there is a core. Okay, there is a core here, and this is a thread form. Correct. So you can imagine that there is a core, and on which the forms are, that is the threads are grooved over here or added over here. So because of this thread form, the core should be kept ductile and tough to ensure maximum energy absorption. So finally what happens, where the torque is getting transmitted or collected from, it is collected from the core itself. Finally, that is how the mechanism works. So core should be ductile enough and tough to ensure maximum energy absorption, and that is why the worm is made from hardened steel. Now the question comes, why worm wheel is soft? Okay, why it is soft and conformable, made from phosphor bronze? First of all, why the difference in material itself? This is hardened steel, tough material. Phosphor bronze is a soft material. Now you would say that, okay, worm is hard, phosphor bronze is soft. So the natural tendency is that phosphor bronze will be subjected to high erosion. It is correct also. It is subjected to high erosion, but not so much as we imagine, so that the entire teeth will get worn out within a short duration of time and will not be left with the worm wheel itself. So once the teeth are out, there is a total failure of the mechanism itself. It is not so much. Okay, let us see that why it is soft, or we would rather say conformable. Very important, this word, conformable. We'll see the reasons. The number of stress cycles is reduced by a factor equal to speed reduction. When you compare the number of stress cycles or fluctuating stresses on worm wheel is subjected to a very small factor. Okay, by a factor equal to speed reduction. If you say, for example, 100:1, speed reduction means when the worm is rotating by 100 rpm, just imagine, say 100 rpm, then the fluctuating stresses on it for one given duration of time is 100. That it will go to a very high value, very low value, very high value, very low value. These are the graphs of the fluctuating stresses. During the same time, the worm wheel will get only one cycle. This is 100, this is only one cycle. Okay, that is why it says reduced by a factor equal to speed reduction. So on the worm wheel, you will have a very less stress cycle. Next, worm wheel cannot be accurately machined, accurately generated in gear hobbing method. You know how the gear hobbing method works. So you use an indexing plate, then use a cylinder, then there is a cutter that comes in between. You index it properly and provide it some rotation and make the profile of the gear. the worm wheel cannot be accurately generated in gear-hopping method. Approximately you can do that, but there is no proper gear-hopping method so far in order to generate that. Why is that? Why we are particular about it? Let us go back and look at that worm wheel again. You look at this particular profile, whether here or here, in animation or this photograph. You see the type of wheel is different. Can you see a groove here? Okay. So, and can you see the shape? It is not as a regular helical gear. That is why there is no mechanism for us to properly manufacture a teeth like this. You see, in between the groove is deeper, at the ends the groove is smaller. Okay, here it is a deep area, this is a shallow area. Okay, and also you see the profile here. I'll just try to draw here. You can see a profile like this. In a helical gear or spur gear, the profiles are always like this. But this is, you see, it's kind of removed. The material is kind of shallowed out or removed. Okay. So what happens because of this? As because of this, there's not proper generation or generation of teeth is not possible. Then how would the teeth conform itself to the general wheel? So the solution to this is, once you decide that this is a worm, once you decide that this is the worm and this is the wheel that I'm going to use for this application, okay, for one particular application, I'm going to use this particular worm and this particular wheel. Then you approximately machine it, whatever from outside processes, and then put them together. Then what happens? You know, this is a harder material, this is a softer material. Now the harder material will rotate and impinge its profile onto the softer material. You got the point? Harder material will create a groove naturally creating an impression of it on the softer material. So what we can say is that that pair is going to be permanent. You just cannot remove this and put it onto a new worm gear. Okay. In spur gear, what happens? Pinion or gear fails, then you remove that and replace it by a new pinion or a gear. But here the entire combination has to be replaced. Why? Because a harder material has already impinged its impression on the softer material, and that combination works well. So it's like a pair made for life. Okay. And that is why it says here, the final profile and finish of the worm wheel is a result of the plastic deformation during the initial stages of service. So what happens is, due to the softness of this material, it impinges or puts that impression. That is a result of this plastic deformation that occurs. So that worm will impinge itself on the worm wheel, create an impression, giving rise to smooth transformation or plastic deformation of the worm wheel. So the final finish is got from the worm impinging the worm on the worm wheel itself. It is not like you totally machine it and put it into service. Okay. Now, having based a discussion on all this, let us discuss a little bit about this and yeah. The friction. How much is the amount of friction? We know that friction is a significant force. Sliding motion between the threads of the worm and the teeth of the worm. When we compare other gears, there is a small amount of rolling motion between the teeth and the pinion. If you say spur gear, then it is totally a rolling motion. Helical, more amount of rolling motion and a small amount of sliding motion. But when it comes to worm gears, it is more of a sliding motion, very less rolling motion. Because of this, there is a significant amount of frictional heat that comes out, and because of that, there is a concept of rubbing speed. Very obvious, rubbing speed. What do you mean by rubbing speed? So that is a relative velocity between worm and the worm wheel. Wherever the worm rubs the worm wheel, there is a relative speed. Okay, so relatively we can say that the worm wheel teeth is quite stationary when compared to the worm itself, and obviously there will be a relative velocity between these two, so that refers to the rubbing speed. When you talk about efficiency of the worm gear, it's low, 50% to 98%. Of course, 98% is achieved with large amount of lubrication and having some new kind of materials and so on. But usually for a open case where large amount of lubrication is not available, very crude applications, very big applications, we would say that the efficiency is just around 50%. Okay, a little bit about self-locking. Okay, I think I can discuss that here. Only in the next class when we go, we can discuss more on the nomenclature, the number of teeth, and those aspects. So self-locking, I'll just briefly discuss here. Very similar to what you have learnt with respect to power screws, the same thing that we would like to mention here. It is self-locking if the coefficient of friction is greater than the tangent of lead angle. Coefficient of friction is greater than tangent of the lead angle, it is self-locking. Okay, so worm will have to drive the worm wheel, worm wheel cannot drive the worm, and such a combination is called as a self-locking drive. Self-locking drive is absolutely important in critical applications. Okay, we would not like it to fail or come back or come down. Okay, if we want it to come back, okay, then we would like to go for a non-self-locking drive, or also called reversible drive. Coefficient of friction is less than the tangent of the lead angle as given for the screw. Okay, so in which applications it is used? If the driven member has large inertia and if driving power supply is cut off suddenly, then the worm is freely driven by the worm wheel. Suppose say you are using this combination in a lift. Okay, so you have a very high torque requirement, you are putting a pulley, and finally there is a worm wheel. Okay, and you are driving using a worm attached to a motor. So what happens? This rotates, it is getting pulled up, suddenly there is a power failure. What happens? Of course, in some applications you would like it to lock there itself, so it has come up from the ground at some distance and gets locked there itself. Okay, but of course due to the gravity, what happens is it will try to rotate the worm wheel itself as much as possible. Okay, but sometimes what happens is it has a very large inertia, and so high inertia that it may damage the worm and come out. This prevents damage, okay, damage to the drive. So in order to prevent that damage, we will give a reversible drive, so that okay, it has stopped working, now the worm wheel will slowly start rotating, and obviously this will start rotating back in a reverse direction, reversible drive, and the load will slowly come down. So such things are also available. Okay, it all depends on application, but this concept of self-locking and reversible drive, similar to power screws, holds good for even for worm and worm wheel. Okay, so thermal considerations are there. I think to discuss this, we'll have to slightly discuss what are the nomenclatures and what do you mean by quotient? What is the nomenclature given specifically to worm and wormhole combinations? So all those things, I think I can continue in the next class. It's already time now. So next class, as you might be aware, that again assignments and quizzes will start. Okay, one round is over, quiz 1 and assignment 1. So quiz 2 and assignment 2 is coming up in the future classes. Okay, so please be prepared. I think notes and all will be communicated soon. Of course, your recordings are already there, already available. I've put up all the recordings so far for the classes that I've taken. So you can go through them and ready yourself. And also the theory part will be mailed to you shortly. Okay, as and when the coordinator gives the appropriate notes, then we'll be communicating to you as early as possible. So students, please be prepared, and you know that it is a cumulative grading process. Whatever happens from the quiz 1 onto the last class also is graded. So see that from your locations you are thorough with all the not only this subject, with all the subject, so that we'll be having a very good evaluation from our side. Okay, so thank you students for joining. Let us meet next class on Friday 2 to 3:30. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, what is the portion for quiz 2?